Everyone wants a better life, but most people think they need to make massive changes to get there. They believe the only way to feel more alive, more grounded, more powerful, more fulfilled is to completely overhaul everything, change their job, move to a new city, end a relationship, start a business, burn everything down, and begin again. But that's a myth. The truth is, your life doesn't change from one dramatic moment. It changes in small, quiet ways, ways that seem insignificant at first, ways that don't make headlines, ways that don't look impressive, but they compound, and over time, they shift everything. Because the secret to lasting transformation isn't intensity, it's consistency. It's not about what you do once, it's about what you do every day, the habits you repeat, the decisions you make without thinking, the things you say to yourself, the way you spend your mornings, the way you respond when things go wrong, the way you carry yourself when no one is watching. Those tiny actions are not just behaviors. They are the builders of your future. And yet, most people overlook them. They chase big breakthroughs, but ignore the small disciplines. They want a new life, but they won't commit to a new routine. They get inspired for a few days and then go back to the same habits that created the very life they're trying to escape. They never build momentum, not because they lack potential, but because they underestimate the power of the small. But everything starts small. Every strong body started with a single workout. Every deep relationship started with a conversation. Every skill, every success, every transformation started with one moment, one choice, one habit. And if you're willing to build the right ones, no matter how small they seem, you can change your life forever. This is not about doing more. It's not about adding more pressure to your schedule. It's about making the smallest possible changes that make the biggest difference. It's about anchoring your day in rituals that shift your mindset, sharpen your discipline, and bring you back to center. It's about choosing to live with intention, even if that intention is only 5 minutes long, because those 5 minutes stack. That intention compounds. And one day you look around and realize your life is different, not because you forced everything to change, but because you quietly refused to stay the same. The first tiny habit that will change your life forever is making your bed. It sounds too simple, too basic, too small to matter. But that's exactly why it's powerful, because this isn't just about tidying up your room. It's about starting your day with order, with intention, with control. It's the first decision of your day, and it sets the tone for every decision that follows. Most people wake up and immediately hand their day over to chaos. They hit snooze, they rush, they leave things undone. And from that very first moment, they send a message to their mind, I don't have time to take control. But when you make your bed, you send the opposite message. You say, this space matters. I matter. I am in charge of how this day begins. It's not about perfection. It's about ownership, about proving to yourself that no matter what else happens, you've already taken control of one thing. You've already created clarity where there was disorder. That feeling of finishing something, of choosing discipline, of restoring a little bit of structure carries into everything else. Because how you do the small things is how you do everything. The person who rushes through the morning is the same person who rushes through conversations. The person who skips structure in their space will skip structure in their thoughts. The person who avoids the smallest forms of discipline will eventually avoid the big ones too. But the one who takes 30 seconds to smooth out the covers, to straighten the pillows, to reset the space, they carry something different into their day. They walk out of that room knowing they've already honored themselves. They've already chosen intention over impulse. And from there, it's easier to make the next good decision. It's symbolic. You're saying to yourself, the day has begun. The rest is over. I'm stepping forward now. That psychological shift is subtle, but real. You're not dragging the night into the morning. You're drawing a line, creating separation, saying, now I go build something. And that frame matters more than most people realize. You return to it. At the end of the day, when everything else feels messy, when work drained you, when life tested you, when things didn't go your way, you come back to a space that's already been reset. A space that doesn't add to the noise. A space that reminds you, you took care of this. You started strong. And that reminder matters, especially on the hard days. This habit builds momentum. It's one small win, but one small win creates the conditions for more. When you start your day by completing a task, you prime your mind for action. You start with control instead of reaction. And that puts you in a different state, a state where discipline feels possible, where progress feels real, where your environment reflects the life you want to live, not just the one you're tolerating. You don't need to change your whole morning routine. You don't need to add complexity. You just need to claim the first moment. Take 1 minute. Start with one action, one reset, one quiet decision to be the kind of person who finishes things, who takes ownership, who creates order. The ripple effect is massive. You'll start organizing more. You'll stop letting small things slide. You'll raise your standard, not by force, but by habit. You'll begin to associate your space with pride instead of pressure. You'll stop walking past disorder like it doesn't affect you, because now you know that everything is connected. That the smallest habits create the strongest patterns. That the state of your room often reflects the state of your mind. This isn't about being a neat freak. It's about reclaiming control in a world that's constantly trying to take it from you. It's about choosing to do one thing well right now, instead of waiting for a perfect day where everything feels easy. Because that day isn't coming. But this one is here. And you have a chance to own it before anyone else gets a say. You don't need motivation, you need momentum. And momentum starts with movement. Something small, something real. Something that doesn't depend on how you feel. Making your bed is that something. It's a declaration, a reminder, a habit that says, I'm the kind of person who starts with order, who begins with action, who builds from the ground up. The second tiny habit that will change your life forever is drinking a full glass of water first thing in the morning. It sounds too simple, too obvious, but that's exactly why people skip it, because they're looking for breakthroughs in complexity when most breakthroughs are found in the basics. Before the caffeine, before the TV, before the emails, before the noise, a full glass of water, not a sip, not a half cup, a full glass. Because after 7 or 8 hours of sleep, your body is dehydrated. Your cells are dry, your brain is groggy. And most people try to kickstart the day by stimulating their system before they've even replenished it. You don't need more energy. You need to unlock the energy you already have. And hydration does that. It wakes you up from the inside. It helps regulate your system. It tells your body, we're starting this day with clarity, not chaos. This is not about some health trend. It's about momentum. Because when you begin your day by doing something that serves your body, you're telling yourself that your well-being matters. You're saying, I don't run on fumes. I don't wait until I'm crashing to recover. I give myself what I need before the day starts asking for everything else. Most people wait to take care of themselves until something breaks, until they get sick, until their energy crashes, until they hit a wall. But those who win, those who last, are proactive. They build systems of support. They don't ask, how do I survive the day? They ask, how do I optimize it from the beginning? That glass of water, it's a signal, a ritual, a habit that says, I fuel before I grind. And when you repeat that every morning, your body begins to trust you. Your mind begins to stabilize. Your energy becomes more consistent, not from some external hack, but from internal nourishment. It's about presence. When you drink that water, don't rush it. Don't treat it like a checkbox. Slow down, breathe, feel it. You're not just chugging, you're resetting, you're anchoring, you're choosing clarity over clutter. And that choice, though small, has power. You start to realize that your habits don't need to be complicated. They need to be consistent. You don't need to spend an hour meditating to find peace. Sometimes peace begins with a breath, a stretch, a drink of water, a signal to your nervous system. We're safe. We're starting strong. We're leading this day, not chasing it. Over time, that consistency builds confidence. Not the loud kind, not the showy kind, but the kind that says, I trust myself to take care of what matters. And when you trust yourself, you make better decisions. You eat better. You move more. You work with more focus. You respond with more patience. Because you're not operating from depletion. You're operating from clarity. And that clarity compounds. You stop riding the roller coaster of energy highs and crashes. You stop using caffeine as a crutch. You stop skipping meals, skipping rest, skipping care. You start living from fullness instead of from empty. And it all begins with one glass of water, one tiny decision, one quiet choice to give your body what it's been asking for. Because the way you begin your day becomes the way you live your life. If you start rushed, you stay reactive. If you start nourished, you stay centered. This habit isn't about changing your entire routine overnight. It's about anchoring your mornings in something real, something gentle, something grounded. Because the most powerful lives are not built in chaos. They're built in rhythm, in patterns that support energy instead of stealing it. You will have hard days. You will have pressure. But when you have a foundation, a simple, solid, nourishing foundation, you can handle more. You bend, but you don't break. You move fast, but you don't burn out. Because you've taken the time to reset yourself before the world asks for more than you're ready to give. So tomorrow morning, before anything else, pour a glass, stand still, breathe, drink it like it matters, because it does. Because it's not just water, it's discipline, it's intention. It's the beginning of a day lived with awareness instead of autopilot. And that's how change starts. Not with intensity, but with the smallest habit repeated again and again until your life begins to shift around it. The third tiny habit that will change your life forever is standing still for 60 seconds before you begin your day. Not rushing, not already planning, worrying, reacting. Just standing, still, present, quiet. A full minute to pause before the momentum of everything else begins. Because most people don't enter their day. They're thrown into it. They're pulled from sleep straight into noise, straight into urgency. And because they never pause, they never anchor. That 1 minute isn't about meditation. It's not about breath work. It's not about productivity. It's about awareness. It's about giving yourself space to remember, I'm here. I'm alive. I get to do this. Not I have to. I get to. Because the truth is, most of what you call stress is not coming from your responsibilities. It's coming from the way you enter them. You don't prepare, you react. And that reaction builds pressure before your day has even begun. But when you stand still, when you breathe, when you pause, when you say, let me get grounded before I move, you change your frequency. You stop absorbing the chaos. You stop grabbing for control. You create space to choose your response, space to remember your values, space to remind yourself that you are not your schedule. You are not your inbox. You are not your deadlines. You are a person with presence, with power, with the ability to choose how this day unfolds. This habit rewires your mind to lead, not chase, to initiate, not react. Because without that pause, you are constantly catching up, constantly behind, constantly running on someone else's rhythm. But with 1 minute of stillness, you reclaim leadership. You say, before I go into the world, I return to myself. And you can do it anywhere. In the kitchen, in the hallway, on your porch, eyes open, hands still, nothing fancy. Just 60 seconds of intentional presence. You don't have to think about anything. You don't have to solve anything. You don't have to do anything. You just stand and allow yourself to arrive in your own life. That arrival is powerful because your body hears it. Your breath slows. Your mind quiets. Your nervous system resets. And that calm becomes your new baseline. Instead of rushing through your day trying to calm down, you begin from calm. And that one shift changes how you speak, how you listen, how you move, how you work. It changes how you handle people, how you respond to pressure, how you process discomfort. Because the stillness you practiced at the start gives you space to regulate when things go wrong. It builds emotional muscle. It teaches your system we don't have to react to everything. We can pause. We can choose. Most people live in a mental spin, a constant loop of doing, responding, solving, anticipating. But you are not meant to live in that state forever. You are meant to return to stillness, to center, to awareness, not as an escape, but as a strategy, as a way of living that grounds your mind in clarity, even when your world feels fast. You don't need to change your schedule. You don't need to add complexity. You just need to begin your day with 1 minute, one moment, where you choose presence over pressure, where you say, before I answer to anyone else, I answer to myself. That choice, though tiny, anchors everything. And the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. You stop feeling guilty for slowing down. You stop associating stillness with weakness. You start realizing that clarity comes from quiet, and power comes from presence. Some of the strongest people you will ever meet are not the loudest, not the busiest, but the ones who have trained themselves to stay grounded, who know how to come back to their breath, who know how to find their center in the middle of the storm, because they've practiced it, not once in a while, but every single day. The fourth tiny habit that will change your life forever is writing down one sentence at the end of every day. Just one. Not a journal entry, not a page, not a full reflection. One sentence about anything. What you learned, what you noticed, what you want to remember. One sentence that captures something real, something honest, something that made today matter. Because most people live every day, then forget it. They go through the hours, then move on. No reflection, no memory, no pause. Just wake up, do the work, go to bed, repeat. And over time, that loop starts to feel hollow. Like life is slipping through their fingers. Like the days are blending together. Like nothing is landing. But when you write one sentence, you disrupt that loop. You stop the rush. You claim something from the day. You say, this meant something. This stood out. This is what I saw. This is who I became today. And that one moment of reflection doesn't just preserve the day, it transforms it. Because when you reflect, you grow. You connect the dots. You notice patterns. You realize, I've handled this before. I've come further than I thought. I keep repeating this conversation. I'm starting to feel stronger here. That sentence becomes a mirror. Not of what you did, but of who you are becoming. You don't need structure. You don't need prompts. You just need honesty, something real. Today I stayed calm when I wanted to snap. Today I felt off, and I'm not sure why. Today I kept going when I wanted to quit. It doesn't have to be pretty. It just has to be true. And over time, those sentences stack. One becomes 10. 10 becomes 100. 100 becomes a record of your life. Not the highlight reel, not the filtered version, but the real one. The quiet progress, the tiny pivots, the invisible growth. The days that didn't seem important until you read them again 6 months later and realize they were everything. Because when you don't track your journey, you forget it. You forget the battles you've won. You forget the strength you've built. You forget how far you've come. And when you forget your progress, you question your power. You wonder if anything is working, if anything is changing. And in that doubt, you slow down. But your growth is real, even when it's invisible, even when it's slow, even when it doesn't show up in big wins or applause or milestones. Sometimes your growth is quiet. It's the way you respond, the way you bounce back, the way you handle a moment that used to wreck you. And when you write it down, even just a sentence, you give that growth the space it deserves. This habit builds emotional intelligence. You learn how to name what you're feeling. You stop reacting. You start understanding. You see what triggers you, what energizes you, what patterns are repeating. You stop blaming the world and start recognizing what you can shift, not in theory, in practice. It doesn't have to be deep. It doesn't have to be wise. It just has to be yours. One sentence. At the end of the day, you can write it on paper, on a note card, on your calendar, anywhere. What matters is the pause, the check-in, the willingness to see your day instead of letting it disappear. And once you build the habit, it becomes part of your rhythm. You'll feel it. That need to close the loop. To ask yourself, what did I carry today? What did I learn? What do I want to bring forward? And what do I want to leave behind? That pause becomes a kind of closure, a reset, a quiet nod to yourself that says, I lived this day with presence. Because life moves fast. And if you don't capture it, you lose it. Not in memory, but in meaning. One sentence is enough to keep the meaning alive. One sentence is enough to hold your story together. One sentence is enough to remind yourself, I'm growing, even when I don't feel it. The fifth tiny habit that will change your life forever is taking one walk a day without distraction. Just your body, your breath, your feet on the ground, and your mind left alone to process, to wander, to reset. Most people don't realize how much noise they live in. Not just external noise, internal. The thoughts, the loops, the tension that never lets go. Their mind is always moving, always reaching, always spinning in a dozen directions. And they never give it room to breathe. They never let the dust settle. They never stop long enough to listen. Movement is medicine, but not just for your body, for your mind, for your perspective, for your peace. When you walk without distraction, something shifts. You start to hear yourself again, not the anxious voice, not the pressured voice, the quieter one, the wiser one, the one that knows how to process what you've been carrying. This isn't about burning calories. It's about burning off the weight of the world, the weight of decisions, of expectations, of information. It's about creating space between stimulus and response, about reclaiming time that isn't filled with tasks or responsibilities, time that's yours. When you build the habit of walking without distraction, you build the habit of reflection, of mental clarity, of emotional reset. Your brain was not designed to stay plugged in 24/7. It needs open space, movement without input, stillness in motion. That's how it sorts, integrates, restores. You don't need to go far. 10 minutes, 15, around the block, up the street, in silence, in awareness, in rhythm. Step after step, breath after breath, thought after thought, allowed to pass without judgment. And sometimes the thoughts are loud. At first, it feels uncomfortable. You'll want to fill the space, but sit in it. Keep walking. Let your thoughts catch up. Let your mind do what it was designed to do. Sort through the noise, put things back in place, filter what matters from what doesn't. Other times there's quiet. Not because your life is perfect, but because you've finally given yourself enough distance from the noise to feel grounded again. And that quiet is a kind of strength, a kind of clarity. You come back from that walk with less anxiety, more peace, not because your circumstances changed, but because your mindset did. This habit builds mental resilience. When you practice being alone with your thoughts, you stop being afraid of them. You stop avoiding them. You stop needing constant distraction to cope. And that kind of self-leadership, the ability to be with yourself, is rare, but it's what builds depth. The most disciplined people in the world know when to disconnect. They know when to unplug, reset, and go inward. Not to escape, but to return stronger. That's what this habit gives you. Space to recalibrate. Space to listen. Space to make better decisions because you're no longer making them from chaos. You can do it anywhere. Morning, afternoon, evening. Around your neighborhood. Down a hallway. Through a parking lot. No rules. No expectations. Just movement and silence. Just you and whatever's been building up in your chest, finally having room to release. And the more you practice it, the more essential it becomes. You start to notice when you're off. You start to feel when the tension is building. And instead of numbing or ignoring it, you move, you walk, you breathe. You take time for yourself, not because it's convenient, but because it's necessary. You'll begin to look forward to it, not because it's exciting, but because it's honest, because it's quiet, because it reminds you that no matter how fast life moves, you always have a way to return to yourself. One walk, one breath, one step at a time. The sixth tiny habit that will change your life forever is pausing before you respond. Just a second, just a breath, just enough space between what happens and what you say next. Most people don't pause. They react. They fire off words, make decisions, defend themselves, explain, overcommit, because they're operating from reflex, not reflection. That reflex is fast, but it's expensive. It ruins conversations. It creates tension. It locks you into choices that you didn't think through. And worst of all, it reinforces a mindset of reaction over responsibility. It trains your brain to say, I don't control this moment, my emotion does. But when you pause, you take your power back. You stop the automatic response. You create a break in the chain. And in that space, you choose how you want to show up. You choose clarity over speed. You choose maturity over defensiveness. You choose alignment over ego. 1 second may not feel like much, but that second is where everything shifts. That second is where you remember what matters. That second is where you see the situation, not just your reaction to it. That second is where you say, I'm not going to let this emotion speak for me. I'm going to speak for myself. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to have the perfect words. But when you pause, you buy yourself enough time to lead the moment instead of be led by it. And that leadership, self-leadership, is the foundation of emotional intelligence. You train this habit in the small moments. Someone cuts you off in traffic. Pause. Someone sends a snarky message. Pause. Your kids frustrate you. Pause. You get unexpected news. Pause. Not forever. Just long enough to breathe. To return to your center. To remind yourself that you don't have to match the energy of what just happened. You get to bring your own. This doesn't mean you become passive. It means you become deliberate, thoughtful, present. And presence is what gives your words strength. Presence is what gives your decisions weight, not volume, not speed, not certainty, but presence. Pausing protects your relationships. It keeps you from saying things you'll regret. It keeps you from committing to things you shouldn't. It keeps you from escalating situations that needed compassion, not control. It keeps your integrity intact because when you pause, you give yourself time to respond from your values, not your frustration. Over time, you'll notice the impact. You'll speak less, but say more. You'll react less, but respond more powerfully. You'll stop regretting conversations. You'll stop needing to apologize for your tone because you gave yourself the space to show up with intention. This habit quiets the mind. It slows the spin. It helps you catch the spiral before it gets away from you. Because when you pause, you allow your thoughts to catch up with your emotions. You allow your logic to re-enter the room. You allow your inner compass to recalibrate. It doesn't take long, just 1 second, one breath. But that breath carries a signal. It says, I'm in control here. I choose how this moment goes. I'm not letting my history write this conversation. I'm not letting my ego close this door. And that choice, that quiet power, that's what builds emotional strength. Most people think strength is found in being quick, sharp, assertive. But real strength is found in the pause, in the restraint, in the calm, in the ability to take a moment, hold it, and then speak from wisdom, not from habit. And the more you do this, the more natural it becomes. You stop needing to defend everything. You stop chasing the last word. You stop fearing silence. you start seeing the pause not as hesitation, but as leadership, as presence, as a mark of someone who doesn't need to rush to prove their point. The seventh tiny habit that will change your life forever is saying no when you need to. Not because it's easy, not because it's comfortable, but because every time you say yes to something that doesn't align, you say no to something that does. Every time you agree to keep the peace, you sacrifice your own. Every time you stretch yourself to make others more comfortable, you weaken your own foundation. Most people are exhausted, not because of what they're doing, but because of what they're tolerating. Their calendar is full of things they never really wanted to do. Their days are filled with commitments that drain them. Their energy is being pulled in 100 directions because they never learned how to protect it. And it's not because they don't know what matters. It's because they don't know how to say no to what doesn't. They think saying no is selfish, that it makes them rude or ungrateful or unkind. But boundaries aren't selfish. They're sacred. They are the lines you draw not to keep others out, but to keep your values in. Saying no is not rejection. It's protection. It's how you guard your time, your energy, your purpose, your peace. It's how you make room for what really matters. Because if you don't protect that space, no one else will. If you don't decide what belongs in your life, everything will find a way in. This habit rewires your mindset by reinforcing that your life is yours. Your time is yours. Your attention is yours. And just because something is asked of you doesn't mean it must be given. Just because someone wants your yes doesn't mean they've earned it. Just because you're capable of doing something doesn't mean you're called to do it. And no, you don't owe everyone an explanation. You don't need to justify your boundaries. You don't need to write a thesis about why this doesn't work for you. A simple, clear no, spoken with respect and confidence, is enough. Thank you for thinking of me, but I won't be able to. That's not something I can take on right now. I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to pass. That's it. No guilt, no over-explaining, no shrinking. Saying no is a skill. It's a muscle. It feels awkward at first, especially if you're used to pleasing people, keeping the peace, being liked. But every time you say no when you mean no, you become stronger. You become clearer. You become more grounded in your own truth. And over time, you begin to see the power of this habit. You start to reclaim your time. You begin to feel less scattered. You feel more focused, more energized, more in control. Because now your schedule reflects your priorities. Your commitments reflect your values. And because you've protected your no, your yes has meaning. This habit transforms your relationships. The people who respect your no are the ones who belong in your life. The ones who don't, they were never aligned in the first place. And when you stop bending to please everyone, you create room for the right people to see you clearly, not for what you can do for them, but for who you really are. And you stop building resentment. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, you store frustration, you hold tension, you carry weight that was never yours to hold. And that weight doesn't just sit quietly, it affects your energy, your attitude, your health. But when you learn to say no with clarity, you stop collecting that weight. You stop abandoning yourself to serve everyone else. Your mindset begins to shift. You stop tying your worth to your availability. You stop needing to be everything to everyone. You start realizing that boundaries don't limit your love. They protect it. They focus it. They allow it to be given freely instead of resentfully. So practice it. The next time you feel that pull to say yes, out of guilt or pressure or fear, pause. Ask yourself, do I really want this? Does this align with where I'm going? If I say yes to this, what am I saying no to? And if the answer doesn't feel clean, say no to it with kindness, with clarity, with conviction. You don't have to be harsh. You just have to be honest. You don't have to fight. You just have to be firm. You don't have to control what others think. You just have to control what you allow. And the more you practice, the more you'll realize you were never meant to say yes to everything. You were meant to say yes to what matters and protect the rest. The eighth tiny habit that will change your life forever is writing things down the moment they matter. Not later, not when it's convenient, in the moment. Because your memory isn't built to carry everything. And what you forget, you can't follow through on. This habit is not about being organized. It's about being honest, about recognizing that when something clicks, an idea, a reminder, a commitment, it's your job to capture it before it fades, before it slips into the noise, before life moves too fast and you lose track of something important. Most people underestimate how much clarity they lose every day. They have good thoughts, realizations, ideas, decisions, intentions, but they don't write them down. They say they'll remember, but they don't. Because memory is fragile. Because thoughts come at the speed of experience. Because life doesn't wait for you to organize it before it keeps moving. Writing things down is not about becoming a note taker. It's about becoming a person who lives with intention, who understands that moments of clarity are sacred and that if you don't honor them, you'll forget them. That if you don't write it down, you probably won't act on it. That if you don't capture the thought when it shows up, you'll be chasing it later, and it might not return. This habit rewires your mindset by building trust. You trust your process. You stop relying on mental clutter to hold everything. You create space in your mind because you've created structure on paper. You're not just remembering, you're capturing. You're collecting the pieces of your life that actually matter, and that collection becomes your compass. This is how clarity grows, not in huge breakthroughs, but in fragments, in little nudges, in passing thoughts that, when written down, become patterns, connections, signals. You start seeing what keeps showing up, what ideas keep returning, what thoughts consistently matter to you, and that self-awareness begins to build something solid. You'll start noticing that your mind gets lighter, that your thinking sharpens, that you stop stressing about remembering everything. Because now you don't have to. You've created a system that holds it for you. A system that says, I don't trust memory, I trust process. This isn't just for goals, it's for the small stuff. The thing you said you'd look into, the question that popped into your mind, the quote that hit you in the right moment, the decision you made when your mind was clear. Because what happens when clarity fades? You question yourself. You forget the reason behind the decision. You hesitate. You stall, and the window closes. But when you write it down, you give that clarity a home. You make it tangible. You make it real. You protect it from being washed away by the next crisis, the next distraction, the next demand. And that protection becomes your advantage. Most people drift. You don't. You've got anchors now. You can keep it simple, a notepad, a pocket journal, a sheet of paper in your wallet. Doesn't matter. What matters is that you respect your thoughts enough to write them, that you respect your goals enough to track them, that you respect your process enough to document it, not for others, for you, for the version of you who will be sitting 3 weeks from now trying to remember what mattered. This habit builds discipline without drama. You stop needing to keep everything in your head. You stop feeling like life is slipping through your fingers. You start realizing that you don't need a better memory. You need a better system, a habit of catching what matters in the moment, not later. Now, so when something hits you, an idea, a priority, a decision, write it. Don't wait. Capture it. It doesn't need to be pretty. It doesn't need to be polished. It just needs to be real. Something you can come back to. Something that reminds you of who you were becoming in that moment. Something that tells your future self, we were serious when we wrote this. Follow through. The 9th tiny habit that will change your life forever is leaving things better than you found them. Not just spaces, moments, not just objects, people, not just tasks, but the energy around them. This habit doesn't require talent. It doesn't require time. It doesn't require permission. It only requires intention. And when practiced consistently, it becomes one of the most powerful mindset shifts you'll ever make. Most people go through life consuming. They take from moments what they need. They leave things unfinished. They walk out of rooms without checking the energy they left behind. But the people who live with clarity, with confidence, with purpose, those people treat every moment like an opportunity to create a small ripple of improvement. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. You don't need to change the world, but you can change something. You can wipe the counter. You can reset the room. You can leave a conversation with more honesty than you entered it. You can walk away from a situation knowing you gave your best effort, your best energy, your best self, even if no one else noticed. The mindset that rewires through this habit is simple. I am not here to pass through. I am here to contribute. I am not here to leave things to chance. I am here to leave things better. And that belief doesn't just shape how you act. It shapes how you see the world. It trains your mind to look for where you can add value, where you can bring peace, where you can reduce friction, where you can bring light instead of wait for it. This habit builds character in silence. It's often invisible. You straighten the chair even though you didn't sit in it. You pick up the wrapper even though you didn't drop it. You pause to speak kindness into someone even though they didn't ask for it. You take the extra minute to complete the task even though no one would have blamed you for walking away. That extra moment, that extra effort is where self-respect grows. Because now you're not doing it for credit. You're not doing it to be seen. You're doing it because that's who you are now. That's how you operate now. You leave things better because you've made the decision that every interaction, every environment, every task is an opportunity for you to bring excellence into it. And the more you live this way, the more peace you carry. You stop rushing through life. You stop treating the details like they don't matter. You begin to realize that how you do one thing really is how you do everything. And if you honor the little moments, the big ones start to honor you. You begin to shift your relationship with responsibility. Most people only take ownership of what's theirs, their space, their job, their relationships. But what if every space you walked into became your responsibility to improve, even just a little? What if every conversation became a place to leave truth, grace, or calm behind? What if you decided that your presence was meant to build something, not just pass through it? That's how you build legacy without trying to. That's how you become the kind of person people trust, the kind of person people remember, not because you were loud, but because they always felt stronger. clearer, calmer after being near you. Not because you did something huge, but because you always did something intentional. You begin to see that your environment reflects your internal standards. And every time you clean up the small thing, every time you fix the crooked frame, every time you restack the chairs or leave a note of encouragement, you're reminding your mind, I leave things better. I leave people better. I leave myself better. And over time, this becomes the foundation of integrity. Not what you say, but what you do when no one's watching. Not the grand moments, but the small ones you never thought anyone would notice. Because those small moments are what create consistency. And consistency is what rewires a chaotic life into one that feels calm, focused, powerful. The 10th tiny habit that will change your life forever is ending your day on purpose. Not just drifting into the night. Not just collapsing into sleep. Not just watching your favorite show until your eyes burn and then saying, I'll do better tomorrow. No. Ending with intention, with clarity, with a signal to your body, your mind, your spirit, we are done for today. We rest now. We reset now. Most people never finish their day. They run until they crash. Their mind is still solving problems, processing conversations, holding tension from things left unsaid. And because they never intentionally close the loop, their sleep isn't restorative. Their energy never resets. Their stress never gets cleared. They wake up already behind because the day before never really ended. But when you end your day on purpose, you begin to create space. You begin to create closure. You say to yourself, no matter how this day went, it's done. I did what I could. And now I give myself permission to rest. That moment of closure matters. It releases the weight. It resets the system. It gives you back your peace. You don't need a long routine. You don't need an elaborate list. You just need a rhythm, a pattern that your mind and body come to recognize. Maybe it's 10 minutes of stretching. Maybe it's brushing your teeth slowly instead of rushing. Maybe it's dimming the lights and saying, we're shifting now. Maybe it's writing one line, lighting one candle, breathing 3 deep breaths. It doesn't matter how you do it. What matters is that you do it on purpose, not perfectly, just consistently. Something that tells your system, we're safe now. We can let go now. We've done enough for today. Because without that signal, your mind will keep solving. Your nervous system will stay alert. And your rest will be shallow. Ending your day on purpose is about dignity, about not letting your day own you, about stepping out of the loop of unconscious momentum and saying, I decide how I close this chapter. And that kind of agency builds power, quiet power, inner power. It prepares you for tomorrow. Because the best days begin the night before, not in a frenzy, not in fatigue, but in peace, in rest, in a slow exhale that says, today is over and I did enough. That simple declaration rewires the part of your mind that thinks it constantly has to do more, be more, prove more. It teaches your mind that rest is not a reward. It's a requirement. This habit builds trust. You start to believe that you can live with rhythm instead of chaos, that you can carry responsibility without being crushed by it, that you can lead yourself through your days and still return to yourself at night, not as a machine, but as a person who deserves rest, a person who deserves closure, a person who is allowed to be done. It teaches you reflection, not the kind that spirals, not the kind that judges, but the kind that says, what did I carry today that I don't want to bring into tomorrow? That simple question is a filter. It's a release. It's an invitation to let go of what no longer serves you before it follows you into another day. You'll begin to feel the difference. The mornings where you slept but didn't rest. The nights where you closed your eyes but never let go. You'll notice how often you've been dragging your stress into your sleep. And you'll decide to change that. Not with another routine, another fix, but with intention, with presence, with the choice to close the day well. Because the way you end your day becomes the way you start the next one. And if you can practice this habit, even just for 5 minutes, you'll begin to notice something small but powerful. You're no longer afraid to stop. You're no longer addicted to pressure. You're no longer carrying the belief that rest equals weakness. You've rewired the mindset. You've changed the narrative. You've said to yourself, clearly, consistently, gently, I've done enough. I am allowed to rest. And tomorrow, I'll rise with clarity. But tonight, I let go. You don't need to change your whole life to change your whole life. You don't need to rebuild everything from the ground up. You don't need a transformation that starts with intensity and burns out by next week. What you need is something smaller, something quieter, something that looks unimpressive at first, but becomes undeniable with time. These 10 habits, tiny as they may seem, are not just routines. They're proof. Proof that change doesn't begin in a breakthrough. It begins in a breath, in a moment of awareness, in a second of intention. And once you stack those moments, once you build on them, once you keep showing up for them, your life starts to shift, slowly, then suddenly. It starts when you make your bed, when you begin with order instead of chaos, when you hydrate your body before the world asks anything of you, when you pause to breathe before you enter the storm, when you claim just one sentence a day to prove you were here, that this moment mattered. When you take a walk with no noise, just you and your thoughts, learning to trust each other again. It starts when you pause before you speak, when you choose presence over reflex, when you say no without guilt because you finally understand that your energy is sacred, when you write things down because your clarity is worth protecting, when you leave things better, not because you have to, but because it's who you've chosen to become. And it starts when you decide that the day deserves a finish. That rest isn't what you earn after collapsing. It's what you practice so you can rise strong again. That being intentional at the end is just as important as being focused at the beginning. That dignity lives in how you close your day, not just in how you chase it. None of these habits will impress anyone on day one. They're not designed to. They're not flashy. They're not loud. But they build something deeper than attention. They build trust with yourself, with your process, with the life you're creating, not in some far-off moment, but right now, in this one. You will not always feel motivated. You will not always feel ready. But these habits don't need your motivation. They need your commitment. They don't care if you're tired. They don't care if it's hard. They only ask one thing, that you show up, that you do the small thing that builds the strong thing, that you do the quiet work that creates the loud result. You've already started. You're already further than you were. And if all you do is choose one habit to start with, one small shift to practice until it becomes part of who you are, you've already begun the process of rewiring your life. Because life doesn't change when you do everything. It changes when you do something and you do it again. And one day you'll look around and realize you don't live like you used to. You think differently. You move differently. You carry yourself with more intention, more strength, more peace. Not because you changed everything overnight, but because you stopped waiting and started becoming.